Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. Saturday morning sit down.
And this morning we are going to talk about Singapore. Why do we want to talk about Singapore? I'll tell you why. The Living in Singapore Reference Guide, which is produced by the American Association of Singapore, is celebrating its 50th anniversary. In print now in the 17th edition. It has long been a trusted source for both newcomers and longtime residents of Singapore, Americans and non-Americans as well, you Singaporeans out there too. Joining us to talk about it is Melinda Murphy. She is the general manager of the American Association of Singapore and the editor of the Living in Singapore 50th Anniversary Guide. Melinda, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn.
And full disclosure, I was the president of the American Association in 2017 at the 100th anniversary of the American Association of Singapore. I know this organization. I love this organization, and I love this book. I have also contributed to this book, chapters here and there. And tell us about the book, Melinda. What is the Living in Singapore Guide all about for those who have been here a long time or for somebody who's just arrived?
Thank you, Glenn. The book itself is a reference guide, and if you think about, since you can't see it, if you were to think of a beautiful travel book, if you were to pick up a travel guide, it looks like that when you pick it up. It's got beautiful photos and maps and guides, but it's really about life here in Singapore and how to make the best life you can have. And so whether you're new to Singapore or somebody who's been here a long time, there are tips and tricks in there for you. And the reason we update it every other year is because Singapore changes so often. And
every 6 months or so.
Every 6 months. 2 years is really not enough. But because it changes so much, there's a lot of content that changes. And so even if you've been here a long time, so I've been here 13 years. Yep. I love Singapore. Singapore is my home of choice. So I find it a huge honor to be able to put this book together for people who may not be as familiar with Singapore as others. Yeah. And it helps them understand the Singapore that I've come to love and care about.
Well, thank you for that introduction. We'll talk about technology and the role that it has played in a minute. But first, it does have the sort of regular type of chapters that you would expect, how to find a home, how to run a house, education, what the options are, dining, health and wellness, business, career, getting around, shopping, life with kids, life as an adult, regional travel, arts and culture, activities and sports, things like that. When you talk about, that there is something for everyone to offer, everyone offers something to everyone, I can just hear people out in the audience saying, yeah, you know what? I'm either a Singaporean, I grew up here, or I've been, as a foreigner, I've been here for many, many years. You can't tell me anything about this town. I know it all. I'm not asking you to argue that point, but what would this offer to somebody who maybe has been here for a while?
Well, what I'd say to that is that, there are restaurants. Think about the restaurant scene and how it changes constantly. And so I found the woman who writes the restaurant chapter, we have 14 writers, and each one writes a different chapter. And the woman who wrote the food chapter loves food. And so she picked up restaurants that, even though I've been here for all these years, that I didn't know about. Things that are new or things that are like secret holes in the wall. There are things about maybe the arts section, all sorts of things that go on that you may not know about. Like, for example, which is the most valuable art piece that you can see for free?
Oh.
Which is very cool.
I don't know. You want to tell us?
Well, there's a quiz here, and in the quiz it can tell you, hang on, I can't remember now what it is. It's not the Picasso. I thought it was the Picasso.
Is it a Botero?
It's not the Picasso. Hang on, give me a second. But there are things like that in here. So, for example, that's something that you should know as well, Glenn, because you've been here a long time, too.
I know, right?
And so there's lots of things like that in here, which I find really interesting. Hang on, I'll tell you what.
I know there's down at in Boat Quay, there's the Botero, the big one. Right by
it is not the Botero.
Yeah.
It is the large reclining figure by the British artist Henry Moore. It's in the CBD, and it's this kind of I don't know how to describe it. It's gold. You've probably seen it.
Yeah.
It's according to Christie's, it is worth $40 million.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Outside?
Yeah.
Sitting outside.
Just laying there.
Laying there outside.
Yeah. Obviously, it's too big to pick up. But, I mean, there are things like that.
I'm not worried about it disappearing.
I've been here a long time, and I didn't know that. And in fact, I didn't know it right now. I had to look it up. And that's one of the joys of having a book, is that you can go back and revisit things that you learned and forgot.
Yeah. The American Association, been around, since 1917, the oldest non-governmental American group. And I know from my time being on the board, and it has really, it founded, it chartered many of the American organizations here, including the American Chamber of Commerce and the American Club and the American School and so many others. The fact that the American Association since the 70s has been doing this book, what's the reason that this is so important for American Association to keep doing this?
I think that we have a charge, if you will, to help,
a mission,
to help people understand this country. And so there's a lot of Americans who come, but also many other people. And it's a tradition at this point that we've done it every other year. And we're very proud to be the ones who are kind of gathering this information. There are other reference guides to Singapore. What I love about this one is that it's not advertiser driven. So if you look at some of these other ones, there's so many ads and there's very little information. But our book is full of information, and it's written by expats for expats. But there's of course a lot of I have Singaporeans on my staff, and they're like, I didn't know that. I'm from Singapore. I didn't know that. And so that's I guess the gift of the book is that it teaches people about a country that they're moving to or that they've lived in for a long time about things they may not know.
It is a hefty book, 490 pages.
That's right.
It is a big one.
I tried to cut it down, but there's just too much to say.
There's a lot to see. One of the elements this year, which is brand new, is you're adding technology into the use of the book. Tell us about that.
I can't take credit for that. I'm the publishing editor. The woman who is the editor, it was her idea, and I love it. It's really taken the book into the next decade. And so there's a free app that you download, which was created by our partner Epiphyte. It's the coolest app ever. So you download it, and then you can scan all sorts of things in the book. So every chapter starts with a video, which you were kind enough to voice for us. All the videos.
Dulcet tones on
14 videos. Yes, thank you.
There you go.
But there are also quizzes, and there are cool things like you can scan an image of the Merlion, and then you can walk around the Merlion, and you can see the front and the back of it. So if you're new to Singapore, or even if you've been here a long time, that's super fun. There are quizzes, like I said before. There are all sorts of different kinds of interesting things. You can walk through the Helix Bridge. You can do things that you might not do with an average book, which takes it kind of to the next level. And the fact that there are videos, if you don't have time to read the whole book and you want to read, learn something, the very top of the chapter always has a video. There are also some interesting things in here that's not about the AR aspects. So, for example, we have stories from people throughout the years. So, if you were somebody who lived here in the 70s, we have some people who've talked about living here in the 70s. It's very different, obviously, than living here now.
Yeah, sure.
And they talk about what it was like when Orchard used to have a lot of hawker stalls, or when they first moved here and they had to cut their hair a certain way. And those are really fascinating stories that kind of bring old Singapore to life. And I feel like this book kind of bridges old Singapore and current Singapore, and that the AR part of it really helps you with the kind of the more modern stuff.
Yeah. How do you decide what you put in a guidebook like this? You mentioned there are lots of guidebooks on Singapore in the world and have been for a long time. How do you figure out what you want to have in this edition, this 50th anniversary?
Challenge. It is a challenge because there is so much. And I was just showing it to somebody, they're like, oh, you need more wine vendors in here. Well, you can only put in so many wine vendors. But I think part of it is the things that people really need to know when they first come. So there's things in here about how do you set up a household, and where do you get your gas, and where do you buy your meat?
How do you change your driver's license to a Singapore license? Those sorts of things.
Do you need a helper? If you need a helper, how do you hire a helper? All those kinds of questions are in here. And then there's also things like regional travel, which is super fun. Everybody loves being able to travel from Singapore. So there's tips and tricks for traveling in the region as well. There's information about some of the newer outdoor activities here. There's always some new trail opening. Or by the way, how many trails do you think are in the? How many kilometers of trails are here?
Oh, you mean like park connectors
Yes.
and things like that? I'm going to say 350.
300 kilometers. Very good, Glenn.
Yeah.
Do you
There we go. I didn't actually know that.
Or
I just figured it was a lot.
It is, but that's a lot. And because they're always changing, we have information on there about, what are the new trail connectors? What's happening? What are things that you don't know about? And also things that close. A lot of has changed since COVID. And so the one that we did after COVID was really challenging because everything changed. But even now, things are constantly changing, updating. The career and business and finance stuff is constantly changing here as well. So all those things go into the book, things that you really need to know about when you first come or when you've been here for a while.
I'm talking with Melinda Murphy, the general manager of the American Association of Singapore and the executive editor of Living in Singapore Guide, the 50th anniversary guide, talking about what happens, what it means to live in Singapore, not just the specifics of day-to-day life, but also how to create a life or expand your life if you've been here as a resident for many years or even as a native Singaporean. What importance does this guidebook take in the SG60 year this year?
It's a real honor to be publishing this book as the SG60 comes out. When you think about the fact that Singapore is 60 and the book is 50, that says quite a lot. We've been doing this for a long time. And I think that there's so much to celebrate in this 60 years, and I think that we've tried to cover a lot of that in this book and try to teach people why it's so special. And we also talk a lot about the arts and the heritage and the culture here, because that's really important for people to know. When they first get here, if you're not from this region, you don't understand what some of these holidays are or how you can celebrate them, or are you allowed to go watch things or be a part of it. And they realize that Singapore is actually quite welcoming, and that's part of the idea behind the book.
When you look at so many different chapters, are some more popular than others? Like, what is the most popular chapter or a popular chapter? Obviously, the food chapter.
I was going to say the food is pretty popular.
Pictures of chili crab and laksa. And,
that's hard to go wrong.
You can't go wrong with that.
I think shopping is popular. I think the travel one is popular. I think the health one is popular. So when people first come, or even if you've been here for a while, let's say something happens. Where do I find the right doctor? How do I? And there are expat chats. There are lots of Facebook groups and whatever else. But to have something in print, I found my copy. When I first moved here, I got a copy of this from Allied. They were my mover. They gave me a copy, and I found it when we were moving houses not so long ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at my book was tattered and torn and earmarked, and I had highlighted things because it was there. And you go on when you first move here, you don't even know what to Google. So I didn't even know that the living area was called a district and what that meant. And there was no map that I could easily see where that was and what schools are near me, and none of that was easy to find. And I think it's still sometimes challenging to find. And when it's in print, and there's something about holding a book versus seeing it on the internet. There's just and we've gone back and forth. Do we still want to do a book? Is it still necessary? But
versus a digital version.
Lots of people buy it, and companies buy it for new employees when they're coming, and people give it as gifts when they have friends moving here, or they buy it for themselves. And there's something about a book. Books are still, travel guides are still really popular in Kinokuniya. You can buy this in Kinokuniya too, and it's not a travel guide, it's a living guide for Singapore. That's why it's called Living in Singapore.
You mentioned companies buying it, moving companies buy it. Tell us a little bit more about that. They'll get a box of them and give them to new employees that come.
Yeah, we have bulk rates, so if you want to buy more than 10. But I find I've heard from several people over the years that when I first moved here, somebody handed this book to me, and it was my real Bible for living in Singapore. I didn't understand a lot of this stuff, or I found that I was just kind of staying in my little radius, and I was doing the very touristy things that were easy to find. But I found this book, and then I was like, oh, look, there's this really cool place to eat that I never would have known about, or I never would have tried that, or I wasn't brave enough to go there. But it turns out that I'm perfectly welcome to go witness some of these different religious ceremonies in Singapore, and that, it gave me the courage or even the knowledge to go try it.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, in recent years, because of the rising costs of living here, a lot of foreign folks who have come in are now not necessarily living in District 10 and central areas. Many more are now moving out into the heartlands, moving west toward Jurong or far east out to Tampines and that area. This also gives some ideas about things happening outside of the core part of Singapore, which also might be interesting for Singaporeans too, right?
That's right. And, it talks about some of the shopping that's maybe further afield, not just on Orchard. It talks about some of the different restaurants. It's not It's not the stuff that everybody thinks of. Like
not a typical tourist guide, which would be.
It's not a tourist guide.
Yeah.
It's a living guide, and that's part of the difference here. So even if you are a Singaporean, if you've lived here a long time, there are things in here. I mean, I know this about like where I grew up. There's things I don't know about my hometown, even though I lived there my whole life, and that's because things change. And it's, I think too, if you're a Singaporean or if you are a long timer, you see things from a different perspective that maybe, because it's from somebody else's eyes. And you go, oh, I would never have thought of that because I've done the same thing in my same radius for a long time.
Yeah. How do you deal with the changes in this book that comes out every couple of years? I know from personal conversations we've had, it's a hair-raising experience. Trying to keep a guide like this, a living guide like this, living because there are so many changes. How do you approach that? Because even like you say, even just since COVID, this country has changed a lot and is ongoing. So.
And I think that's, when you write a book normally, you sit down at your coffee table or your kitchen table, whatever, and you sit down and you hammer out a book. This book, because things change so fast, we hire a writer for every chapter. So there's 14 chapters, there's 14 writers, because we want to fact check stuff as current as possible. And I can't have one person doing that. It would take 2 years, and then it would all be out of date. So we have 14 writers, and then we have an amazing editor. Katie was a spectacular editor on this, and she worked really hard to fact check, and then I fact check. So we have a lot of fact checking going on, a lot of double checking. Even though, we publish it, of course, like the day after a restaurant will close, something will happen. But we try really hard to make sure it's as current as possible. Yeah. And we find writers who really have been here for a while and who really care about that topic. So they are passionate about whatever it is. They know a lot about business. They know a lot about, restaurants or healthcare. Dr. Stephen Tucker from Tucker Medical has written the health chapter for a long time, and he updates it because there's a lot of things that have changed in health, especially post-COVID. Yeah. And he's, a really good source for us to keep things. And we do a Living in Singapore talk based on this book so that people can come and ask. I think you're going to be one of our speakers this year.
I will, yeah.
Glenn has, he was very, very kind about himself. He has done 8 books of this. How many? 8 versions of the same chapter or different chapters?
Yeah, usually the first chapter.
Yeah, the first chapter, which is all about the history of Singapore, which is super fat. It's my favorite chapter.
Well, thank you. It's my favorite chapter too.
It's because I really like the history of Singapore. I think it's all very interesting.
I do enjoy writing that chapter, and for me, it's been also a journey to understand more about Singapore, the place that, our adopted home. And it is funny because a lot of times I will talk to Singaporeans and just in conversation, some little fact will come up that I have researched and found, and they had no idea. Yeah. And I think, as you said, to your point earlier, sometimes you live in your hometown and you don't really know everything that's going on in it, right?
Yeah, one of the quizzes in here, which everybody gets wrong, is how most of the Japanese came to Singapore during the occupation. How did they travel here? Do you know how they all traveled here?
No, I don't.
On bicycle.
Oh, you mean they got to Singapore from... Wait, explain that.
So, in other words, during World War II, how did Japanese forces primarily advance over
Japanese
Malaysia?
Forces. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they invaded on bicycle. Which, most people don't know. They always get that quiz wrong. So there's things like that in here that you're going to learn, which is kind of fun to kind of pull out at a party.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Party conversation.
Melinda, how do folks find the book if they're interested in knowing more about it?
Sure. aasingapore.com. It's online. You can also buy it at Kinokuniya or Lims in Holland Village. And, if you go to our website, aasingapore.com, there's a whole bunch of information. It's also available on Amazon. So there's lots of different ways you can do a digital version on Amazon.
All right. Melinda Murphy, the General Manager of the American Association of Singapore, the Living in Singapore Guide celebrating its 50th anniversary. Thanks for being with us today. Great to see you.
Thank you.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.